So today in this session, we are going to start with Unix and Linux operating system. You must have heard about Unix or Linux. So let's start with introduction of Unix or Linux. So what actually Unix is, or let's say before heading towards Unix or Linux specifically, what actually uh, operating system is, why we need to have an operating system. As if now, what we have learned about operating system is it acts as a bridge between users and the computer hardwares. So it is the one who instructs each and every peripheral device or the other devices or memory to behave. So every time you switch on your computer, you see a screen where you can perform different activities like write, browse the internet, or watch a video. So any application you can opt for. So what is it that makes the computer hardware work like that? How the multitasking or multi-programming thing can happen? How does the processor on your computer know that you are asking it to run an MP3 file? Well, it is the operating system or kernel that does this work. So, to work on your computer, you need an operating system. In fact, you are using one as you read this on your computer. Now, you may have your popular operating systems like Windows, Apple OS X, but there we will learn introduction to Linux and Unix operating system. So you can opt for any. Linux and Unix both have certain limitations, certain benefits over one another, and it's totally user's choice. You can a user can opt for any. So moving ahead with Unix, what actually is Unix? Unix is an operating system which was uh, first developed in 1960s, and it has been under constant development ever since. So it's keep on evolving and improving as is now. And by operating system, we mean the suite of programs which make the computer work. It is a stable or multi-user multitasking systems for servers or desktop and laptops. And Unix system also have a graphical user interface which is quite similar to Microsoft Windows, which provides an easy to use environment. So it can be provided with certain icons. You can just click on them, figure out the application, work over that application. This way, it is providing you with all the graphical user face interface usabilities. However, the knowledge of Unix is required for operations which aren't covering by graphical programs or for when there is no window interface available. Example, in telnet session we don't have any GUI, so we have to know the Unix command, we have to know about the programs, how we can operate these programs. So this way we need to know more in detail with Unix when we are working with Unix. So the Unix operating system was initiated or was born in late 1960s at 80 and 8 Bell Labs released on operating system which is called Unix, written in C language, which allows quicker modification, acceptance, and portability. So it began as one man project under the leadership of Ken Thompson of Bell Labs. It went on to become most widely used operating system, and Unix is the proprietary operating system. You can use the Linux operating system. I mean, it can work with command line interface as well. But recently, there have been developments with graphical user interface, and you can work very easily with Unix system using these GUIs. And Unix is an operating system which is quite popular in companies, universities, big enterprises, etc. So, we are having three major types of Unix, and there are different versions of Unix. Although they share common similarities, the basic features are same, but yes, there are advancements in these types. And the most popular variants of Unix are Sun Solaris, GNU or Linux, and Mac operating system X. And when we are talking about Unix operating system, Unix operating system is made up of majorly three parts: the kernel, shell, and the programs. The kernel of Unix is the hub of operating system. It allocates time and memory to programs and handles the file store and communications in response to system calls. So when there is any system call, any interruption, or any request to resources triggered, it is the kernel who actually allocates, deallocates, who actually analyze the things on behalf of operating system. So as an illustration of the way that the shell and the kernel work together, suppose a user type rm my file has the effect of removing the file my file. So when you want to remove your file with the name my file, you have to trigger a command with rm. The shell searches the file store of the file consisting the program rm. So you have instructed with the program that is rm, and then request the kernel through system calls to execute the program rm on my file. So when the process rm my file has finished running, the shell then returns the Unix prompt person to the user and indicating that it is waiting for further commands. So simply you have to for removal of a file, you have to fire a program with rm. Shell will search the rm function. That means it will be enabling the removal function, and then it executes rm and the file will be deleted. And when we are talking about shell, the shell act as an interface between the user and the kernel. So undoubtedly, both shell and kernel work in collaboration, in a coordination. But yes, shell is over the kernel, which is more closer to user, and it acts as a interface between user and the kernel. So when a user logs in, so basically when the user logs in, the login program checks the username and password and then starts another program called the shell. The shell is a command line interpreter. So it is mainly a command line interpreter. It interprets the commands the user types in and arranges for them to be carried out. So it is mainly the translator between the user and the kernel so that they can communicate with each other. The commands are themselves programs. So those instructions, whatsoever the programmable codes we are writing over command line, they are what they are actually the programs, which is the third part of Unix. So when they terminate, the shell gives the user another prompt. The adept user can customize his or her own shell, and users can use different shells on the same machine. So staff and students in any organization or school or institute have the TCSH shell by default. By default, any enterprise who is going to use with Unix, they are having TCSH shell, and the TCSH shell has certain features to help the user inputting commands. Like they have file name completion by typing part of file of a command, file name or directory, and pressing the tab key. The TCHS shell will complete the rest of the name automatically. So these are the minor commands or functionalities that are featured with TCSH shells. And there is also one command, that is history. The shell keeps a list of commands you have typed in. So it is keeps on logging or maintaining the history for records or for future reference. If you need to repeat a command, use the cursor key to scroll up and down, and the list or type history for a list of previous commands will be executed. So this is how it is provisioned with your commands and command line programs. And everything in Unix is either a file or a process. A process is an executing program identified by a unique process identifier, that is the PID, and a file is a collection of data that are created by users using text editors, running compilers, etc. Like taking an example of file is what? It is a document or report or essay that can be any which comprises of certain data. The text file of a program written in some high level programming language, that is also considered as a file. And instructions comprehensibly directly to the machine and incomprehensible to a casual user. For example, a collection of binary digits, that is also what? That is executable file or a binary file. Then we are having a directory. uh, any directory, it is basically a containment of information about its content. So directory is containing information about its content, and which may be a mixture of other directories. We can have subdirectories into one directory, or it can be the ordinary file. So these all comes under your file. So moving ahead, what actually is a Linux? What is Linux? Basically, Linux is an operating system or a kernel distributed under an open source license. Its functionality list is quite like Unix, and the kernel is a program at the heart of Linux operating system that takes care of fundamental stuffs like letting hardware communicate with softwares. So it is an intermediate between the end user and the hardware. So basically, when we are talking about Linux, Linux is a operating system which was built on Linus Torvalds at University of Helsinki in 1991. And the name Linux comes from the Linux kernel, and it is the software on the computer which enables applications and the users to access the device on the computer to perform some specific functions. Basically, Linux operating system relies on instructions from an application from the computer's processor and send the results back to the application via Unix operating system. It can be installed on different type of computers like mobile phones. It can be installed or tablet, video, game consoles, etc. So it is very compatible. So you can install it anywhere as per your requirement or as per your interest. And the development of Linux is one of the most prominent example of free and open source software collaboration. Even today, many companies and a similar number of individuals have released their own versions of operating system based on Linux. They have customized their operating system, but the basis was Linux. Moving ahead, we are having few features of Unix. Uh, So firstly, we will be discussing the features of Unix and Linux both. Then we'll be comparing both. So when we are talking about features of Linux, when compare Unix to Linux, Unix is a multi-user, multitasking operating system. It can be used as the master control program in workstations and servers, and hundreds of commercial applications are available. So in its heyday, when it is adaptive, when it has been just launched, so Unix was rapidly adopted and become the standard operating system in universities. So the adaptive factor of Unix is quite high. And when we are talking about features of Linux operating system, it also supports multitasking. The programs consist of one or more processes and each process have one or more threads. It can easily coexist along with other operating systems. So you can simultaneously work on different operating systems when you are working with Linux. And comparing features of Unix and Linux, Unix can run multiple user programs at once. And individual accounts are protected because the appropriate authorizations are done. So it is quite secure as well. When comparing with Unix and Linux, Linux is replica of Unix but does not use its code. Undoubtedly, Unix is an advancement to Linux only. It is quite similar to Unix, but it doesn't use the code. Backend code is not used in Linux. Rather, it have the more flexibility as compared to Unix. So, moving ahead, there are certain differences in um, both the operating systems. As in, when we are talking about Linux on grounds of cost, Linux is freely distributed and downloaded through magazines, books, websites, etc. And there are paid versions also available for some professional or advanced access. And when we are talking about Unix, different flavors of Unix have different pricing depending upon the type of vendors. And when we are talking about development, Linux is open source and thousands of programmers collaborate online and contribute to its development. So it was developed in collaborations, not by one. And when we are talking about Unix, Unix system have different versions. These versions are primarily developed by AT&T as well as other commercial vendors. So who can use Linux or Unix? Like if we are talking about users, everyone can use Linux, from home users to developer and C computer enthusiastic alike. So anyone can have access to Linux. When we are talking about Unix, Unix can be used in internet servers, workstations, and PCs. So there are a limited scope of Unix as compared to Linux. And when we are talking about GUIs, the graphical interface that are provided by both operating systems, Linux provides two graphical user interfaces, that is KDE and GNOME. And through like there are many alternatives such as Mate, LXDE, XFCE, etc. So these are the various GUIs that are provided by Linux to make the task of users very easy. And when we are talking about Unix, the common desktop environment and also has GNOME, by which we can have the access to Unix. Also, they are quite different in when we are talking on grounds of viruses. So Linux had about 60 to 100 viruses listed to date, which are currently not spreading. And there are between 80 to 120 viruses reported till date in Unix. So they are also listing and not allowing these viruses to spread. That means they are self-tackled, they are tackling by their inbuilt operating systems. So the best feature of Unix is kernel update without reboot. So this is the best feature of using Linux. But when we are talking about Unix, Beta ZF's next generation file systems, dtrace, that is the dynamic kernel tracing, is used. And as I have already mentioned the few versions of Unix, there are different versions of Linux as well, that are Red Hat, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, etc. And when we are talking about Unix, there are different versions of Unix are HPUX, AIS, BSD, etc. And when we are talking about usages, Linux operating system can be installed on various types of devices like mobile, tablet computers, and Unix operating system is used for internet servers and for workstations and PCs. So these are few of the differences. And when we are talking about the portability, Unix is portable and is booted from a USB stick, whereas when we are talking about Unix, Unix is not at all portable. So these were few differences of Unix and Linux. So this is all for today's session. And in today's session, we have discussed about what actually Unix is, the various types of Unix, about the kernel and the shell and the programs of Unix. Then we have done with the introduction to Linux. Then we have discussed few of the differences. So when we are talking about the differences comparing Unix versus Linux, uh, Unix source code is available to the general public, whereas in Unix the source code is proprietary. And Unix was created in 1960s at AT&T Bell Labs, whereas Linux is an operating system built by Linus Torvalds at University of Helsinki in 1991. And the main difference between Linux and Unix is Linux is a clone to Unix. So the basis of Linux is Unix. So when we compare Unix to Linux default shell is Bash, while the Unix shell is Brown shell. And the one key Unix and Linux difference is that Linux threat detection and solution are very fast, while Unix users require longer wait times to get the proper bug fixing patch. Important versions of Linux are Red Hat, Ubuntu, open source, Solaris, whereas important versions of Unix are HPUX, AIS, BSD, etc. So, guys, this is all for today's discussion. And if anyone is having any kind of doubt, as if now, you may ask